Okay, good evening, everybody. It's a little after 7 o'clock, so we're going to begin. I'll call the meeting of the Rockport Select Board to order for Monday, May 13th, 2019, here in the Parker Room. I know that a couple of our members are not present right now. One is traveling back in. Dr. Cole should be here in half an hour or so, I think, or 45 minutes. And Jeff will be here at some point.
I thought Doug was out of town, though.
He's coming back, but I got a text from him saying he would be around. So we'll begin the meeting. We do have a quorum right now, so we can start. We don't have any public hearings this evening. We don't have any minutes to approve. The next select board meeting will be a meeting on Tuesday, May 28th at 7 p.m. here in the Park Room at the Opera House, and it will be streamed. And following that, the organizational meeting of the new select board will take place on Wednesday, June 12th, 2019, at the conclusion of the annual town meeting at the Rockport Opera House upstairs main stage. We also have a workshop scheduled for the future development of the RES site on Wednesday, May 29th at 6 p.m. At the Opera House. And is that going to be upstairs, do we think?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be upstairs. That was the plan.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that'll be an interesting workshop for people to come to. No decisions being made there, but looking for a lot of public input at that time. Some other announcements. The town office will be closed on May 27th, Monday, May 27th, in observance of Memorial Day. In addition, the town clerk's office will be closed on Monday, May 20th for elections training. Other parts of the town office will be open that day, but the clerk's office will be closed all day Monday for training for the election clerks. Also, the town clerk wanted me to announce that absentee ballots are now available, and so folks can come in whenever the clerk's office is open and get an absentee ballot and cast their ballot before election day if they like. The annual town meeting, speaking of elections, will begin on Tuesday, June 11th, 2019 at 8 o'clock in the morning with voting at the town office. Then we'll adjourn at 8 p.m. that Tuesday evening. We'll resume on Wednesday, June 12th at 7 p.m. at the Rockport Opera House upstairs for the open portion of the meeting to act on all remaining articles. And I believe that's all the announcements we have this evening. Do we have any agenda changes this evening? Hearing none. Public comment is next. Public comment should be directed at issues not under discussion on this evening's agenda. Comment from the public will be welcome prior to each agenda item. Further comment will be granted only by permission from the board, and all public comment should be brief and to the point. And I know we have one gentleman who wishes to make public comment to begin with.
David Coffey. This is pertaining to the workshop about the RES site. And it's really not expressing any opinion about it, but process for that. And maybe even more perceptions than process. And I wish Dr. Cole was here for this.
He'll watch the live stream.
Yeah, hope he does. Anyway, I had a brief discussion with him about this a couple weeks ago at a previous meeting. Anyway, my understanding is it's been an informal working group meeting, a couple of select board members, some staff members, etc., and so forth. Quite appropriate, way to go forward. What surprised me when I saw the article from about 4 weeks ago in the Penn Bay Pilot was that apparently some decisions have been made, and some fairly pertinent decisions. Now, I know there will be wait a minute, no, we really haven't decided anything, but there's decisions in terms of guiding where things will go, and then there's the final official decision. I looked through the minutes, and I don't know when the select board last really discussed this. I couldn't find when the working committee was asked to meet, and if the select board, it was a formal action of the select board, or just, hey, let's get some folks together. What I'm referring to is the 4 principles that particularly Dr. Cole has been citing as, this has been decided. This is the way things are going to be as we go forward now. And when I read the Penn Bay Pilot article about the upcoming meeting, it basically said that these principles we emphasized, and those will be the framework through which things will happen. People will be asked to give their input around this. Now, seeing some slightly puzzled looks. What I'm referring to in particular is principle number 1. Development of this property must, that's a very strong word to use in a principle, must, result in a significant contribution to Rockport's tax base. So that basically says there's a principle that this, at least some of the property will be turned over to private use. That may well be the best way to use, for the best use of the property. But I really think there should be some public discussion about what overall things want to be before, as described in the article, taking these four principles, passing out, breaking people into small groups and saying, what's the best way you'd like to see this used in order to get basically for at least private use. If the select board has previously talked about that, at least, in the recent history, fine, just, say that this is what's been discussed. I asked Dr. Cole about it, and about this, and he said, oh, it's been discussed before, it's, everybody, it's sort of been agreed that this is what we want to do. I don't know when that was. I am a fairly regular follower of, what happens in the town since for the last 4 years. I don't really recall. If he's talking about back in 2010 or so, fine. If it's been a widespread public discussion since, open discussion, not a bunch of people, fine. That should just be made clear. And I think that at a workshop where you want to ask input and, really the first public event in at least a while about this, there should be kind of, at least initially, all options on the table, not a, this is our principles, this is what we've decided, and with the whole workshop guided towards reinforcing those principles and effectively having people understand. So, at least to me right now, there's the perception that some folks have gotten together with, I'm sure, best intentions, decided this is what needs to happen. And as I said, I honestly do not have an opinion as to whether that's a good idea or not. It may be, maybe not. I could talk a little bit while some of the reasons it might not be, but there needs to be some open discussion about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
David, let me just respond. I'm the other select board person on that group, and Doug did bring those principles to the select board meeting since I've been elected. I mean, so it was either in fall of 2018 or since the first of the year. We discussed those four principles. I don't know that we ever actually adopted
No, I
the
don't think we
principles.
did.
And the group isn't looking at it that way. We're looking at those as being sort of working principles, and I don't know how it was reported, but they are working principles that we wanted to have guide the discussion with the brainstorming session, but it's not cast in stone. Although there's nothing new and unique about them, because actually they were really based on tons of work in public meetings that have occurred over the past, 10 years on this issue.
Yeah.
So they're not.
Not to get into debate, but real quick, I've looked through the minutes. I couldn't find it in the minutes. I
Yeah.
know the minutes sometimes are summaries and tend to,
Yeah.
don't get into the nitty-gritty of
It
just
happened.
discussion.
It happens.
So if somebody could forward where it is in the minutes.
It may have been a workshop, I don't.
Well, I think,
No, it was here.
but it may have
was-
been just a discussion and liaison reports or something of that
I
nature.
think so.
that
I
it was
think
an
that's
informal
exactly
part of the
right.
discussion. There
And-
certainly were no votes.
Yeah.
There
I'm
were
not
no
saying there were
votes.
votes, but in a process like this, people come to conclusions and then you later have a vote with everybody nodding
Yeah,
their
your
head.
point's taken,
But
but
I think your point is good, because I think, and Deborah will probably agree, that a big part of this workshop is to gather input. And if the working group work with some, let's say, guidelines, I don't know if principles may be too strong a word, but guidelines, but if those guidelines, if the people coming to this workshop think those guidelines aren't right, I expect them to stand up and say
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and so I think the first part of the workshop should be, these are what we've done, and as I said, must is a strong word. These are what we've done. Do we have buy-in for those? Not, here's the guidelines, here's what we decided, now we're moving ahead.
yeah, no,
Which is the indication of how at least as of 4 weeks ago, and when I talked to Dr. Cole, how he planned to proceed.
yeah, Bill and Hannah had been working, Bill Napower and Hannah had been working on how the presentation's gonna go, and actually, I believe that's exactly how they intend to start.
I hope they do. It's not what was written 4 weeks ago, so. Okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
know what's written in the
Well,
paper,
good, thank you very much. Does anybody else have public comment to make at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the town manager's report. We have that report in our packets. It was published in the local media today, at least one media outlet online. So our idea recently has been to just go to the report and see if there are any board questions of the manager, or if the
Couple of-
manager has any additions or.
A couple of things is, with the ambulance review committee meeting, I just got an email at the end of the day saying that we haven't gotten a draft one-year contract, but they were willing to go back to the draft one-year contract. As you know, we've been discussing this for quite some time. But it looks like we'll at least have something in front of us the plan is to get it in front of you before the end of the contract in the end of June.
I hope we have it on the 28th.
And also, I've gone through the list of people that we knew about that were potentially interested in the owner's rep position. And, the board needs to kind of make a decision of how you want to proceed on interviewing or searching, or what you want to do with an owner's rep, how that's going to proceed. We basically have two people. Many people are busy or unable to do it for one reason or another. So,
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I do have. I happened to be present the other day, getting ready to sign warrants, and I heard Jason mention that his West Rockport Fire Station doesn't have adequate water because of a line issue, that he has to take the trucks back to the Rockport station, and he doesn't have enough money. He has $300 in a line item, then he said it's gonna take $500 or $600 to fix it.
right, I didn't
Can,
realize that
can we,
until.
can we get that done by the end of the month?
Yeah.
I mean, we did fix the boiler at the harbor master's office by taking money out of a reserve, so we ought to be able to find.
Right.
I mean, that's fairly,
Yeah, that was the first I heard about it. I didn't realize that the line, main water came in and apparently there was a water main break, and the solve for that without having to dig up and replace the whole line was to run a smaller line through the other line, which cut down the flow of water, which is,
I think his exact words, I can barely fill an Indian tank. And the other part about that is, while we're talking about that, can we also take care of Doug Cole's water spigot while we're at it?
that's it. That's what we're talking about.
It's more than
No, the exterior thing.
the exterior
Right, that's
water.
what, oh, yeah, that's what generated that conversation
Okay,
was.
well, I just want to make sure, because because I didn't know he was
Right.
going to be here, but
Right.
I'm
But I-
lobbying for it, because
Yeah.
we went to great
I
depths
think-
to get the stuff planted out there, and
Right, I had asked the Public Works Director to make that happen, and the first I heard about it was when Jason said that there wasn't enough water flow there, so.
can we get sort of an update maybe tomorrow or something, if you have an idea of when it can be done?
I'll try, yeah.
Well,
try
I
to
mean,
get
you
an
know,
update.
it's fairly important, so I mean, even if
Yeah.
it's by the end of the month would be.
Right. Oh, I agree. It's getting to the time where those plants need to be watered.
And the building needs to have water for the fire trucks, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll never get to the point, I don't think, Maine Water's, well, he's not there. But I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where we'll be able to fill the trucks out of that hose. That was never the intent of the hose, that water system, but
I'm
I'll
not,
check into
two
it.
different things.
Yeah, if we can
Just
just
get
get
it
some
fixed.
detail on it, I think.
Also on manager's report, I ask if we could going forward. A lot of people don't know who the players are in the town government by first name, and I think
Oh,
it'd
okay,
be
yep.
appropriate to refer to folks by their title and not by their name.
Okay, thank you, yep.
Rick, could you go back for a second to the ambulance contract? When do you think we're gonna have that, or what's holding it up, or?
Well, the four managers met with the representatives from Northeast last
Thursday.
Thursday, yeah. Last Thursday, and, as Ken and Mark know, is they were proposing potentially a 5-year
Yeah, I know.
contract.
Yep.
We impressed on them that we weren't gonna be able to move that forward, and he had to go back to the owners of the company and make sure that a 1 year was gonna work out, and apparently it had. I got that late in the day today, that they are ready to move forward with a
So
contract.
what stands between that and a finalized version?
Typically, it goes to the ambulance review committee, for the ambulance review committee to make a recommendation to the four boards.
Okay.
And getting that committee together has been a bit of a challenge. You know,
Yeah, we're dealing with 4 towns' schedules, unfortunately, and we had a meeting scheduled for the week before I left, and then we couldn't get anybody from Lincolnville and Hope, so it was pointless to have the meeting.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
But I would hope that we would have, and it may be that we have to look at it as a board before the ambulance review committee gets a chance, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think we've gotta have it on our agenda for the 28th, is my opinion.
Right.
You know, because we've gotta get that done.
Well, the contract's up July 1st, right?
yes.
So we could let it bleed into June, but we don't have any meetings scheduled for June right now until after the town meeting, so that would be the new board, and they would have, very little time at that point. So
Right.
at the very least, I'd like to see a draft of it for the 28th, so that we
My-
can take a look at it and say, yeah, this is good, we're good to go, and we'll sign, if we have to sign it at a later time, then.
My hope is, because he didn't give me, there was no copy of it with his email. But my hope is that it's gonna be the same contract with the same rate. And they were originally asking for just a minor change to the training requirements that they have. And they were good to go with that previously. And my hope is that we're going back to that agreement. Because as I pointed out, is that when we were negotiating this new method of working with Northeast Ambulance, that they were reluctant to sign a multi-year contract until they saw that it was gonna work for them, and it is working for them, and so now they want, they wanted a multi-year contract. Well, we're not at that point where we're ready to sign a multi-year contract. And I think that's uniformly right across the 4 towns, I think.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the manager's report? Okay. On to the consent agenda. And we have on the consent agenda, donation from Maine Coast Heritage Trust, $5,600 as a payment in lieu of taxes. And with the board's consent, I would like to add something to the consent agenda, which I just received from the town clerk before the meeting, and that's another payment in lieu of taxes from Maine Media College. And I have the letter here to the assessor saying, Dear Carrie, Maine Media Workshops and Colleges pleased to voluntarily make payments in lieu of taxes to the town of Rockport in recognition of services provided by the town. Suggests that these payments are calculated at the rate of 30% of previous town assessed tax valuation. The enclosed check for $10,479 represents Maine Media College and Workshops April 2019 payment. So if we could add that to the motion, that would be great for the consent agenda.
You ready for,
Aye.
go ahead.
Move
Unless
to
you're ready.
accept the donation in the amount of $5,600 from Maine Coast Heritage Trust as a payment in lieu of taxes, and a check in the amount of $10,479 from Maine Media College also as a payment in lieu of taxes.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes, the consent agenda as amended passes. On to unfinished business. Last time we talked about the allocation of costs to capital projects, and Megan has provided us with a modification, a suggested modification, which we just have to sort of, at this point, I think, say we would like to push this forward. It's not ready for prime time quite yet. It's in section 29 of the internal controls policy. And so I would open that for discussion at this point.
The need again, Ken, is to just continue it moving.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we're quite ready for prime time yet. Does
We're
anybody have any
not.
comments about it, and what we would like to do with it? I read through it and it looks, generally okay. There were a couple things that I was, get it up
I-
here.
I would suggest that maybe if you guys have comments, you get them to me, because, we do have this procedure where when we do policies, that it's supposed to be shown to me before we take it to the board, so, whatever, but we're not approving it right now anyway, so if
No.
you guys have comments, get them to Megan or get them to me, and then, because I have a lot of comments.
Okay.
I'm good
Any of
with
those we
moving
want to
forward.
have discussion on that at this point, or? 'Cause if there is substantive changes that you're suggesting, it would seem like the board discussion
Yes, right.
would be appropriate at this
I
point.
assume that you're just talking about non-substantive changes, because we discussed it at the last meeting in terms
Yeah,
of the
I think we were,
substance.
I think we all agreed on the substance, and I think that this is, captures that for the most part. And I said, but, I mean, are the changes you're talking about just formatic or wording, or?
Yeah, and to be consistent with the rest of the policy that Megan and I drafted.
Okay.
It's not, so,
Okay.
I mean, it just needs a little.
All right. Well, if the board is all right with that, then we can
Move forward.
with that and get it ready for prime time at the appropriate time. And time is not terribly of the essence with this. I'd rather get it right than rush through it
Yeah.
personally. So, okay. On to new business. We have Maria Libby here, Superintendent of Schools, along with, I see several school board members in the audience tonight. And Maria's going to make a presentation on the state of the schools, as it were.
Thanks. I am here tonight with three board members, Marcia Dietrich, Matt Daly, and Carol Gartley, as well as our business manager, JC. I might have to throw lifelines to them a couple of times. I'm presenting two budgets for you tonight because Rockport is part of two different districts. The SAD 28, which is our two K-8, the two schools in the K-8 age group, the Camden Rockport Elementary School and the Camden Rockport Middle School. And I will do that one first, and then I will present the Five-Town CSD budget, which is the high school's budget. I'm just going to start with the mission statement for SAD 28. The mission is to be kind, work hard, and keep learning. When we created both of the budgets that you'll see tonight, that will be voted on next week at the public budget meeting, we used 6 budget filters in crafting. Actually, it's 5, I think. It's hard for me to see from here. We used 5 budget filters to craft the budget. One of them is what's in the best interest of our students, what is needed for continual improvement, how do we prioritize quality instruction, what is needed to move forward on our strategic plan, and what is fiscally responsible to our taxpayers. The bottom line for the SAD 28 budget, I'm going to show it to you actually with 3 different bottom lines. Because we have increased debt service this year in the SAD 28 mainly due to the renovation of the MET building, the vote which was passed last November approving $4.9 million. That's reflected in our budget next year. So if we take out our debt service increases, our budget comes in at a 3.46% increase. If we add in the increased expense due to debt as well, our budget is coming in at 8.04%. That's our expense budget. And then when we couple the revenue side with that, it yields a 7.26% impact to taxpayers. At the end of the presentation, I will get to the breakdown between Camden and Rockport. This chart shows 10-year October enrollments in those 2 schools. You can see, coincidentally enough, that the elementary school's enrollment is a 0% change, the exact same number that was there 10 years ago. There have been a few fluctuations, but it's been pretty steady. And the middle school has had a slight decrease in those 10 years. And this, the levels have stayed pretty steady recently. This table shows the budget increases over the past 10 years. And it's pretty clear to see that last year, the budget that we're in right now, which was 18-19, had a very large increase due to the middle school project. This year's budget has quite a bit higher than normal increase due to mainly to the middle school, to the MET project, but also a little bit to some increased debt service at the middle school, which we'll talk about later. But our 10-year average is just over 3%, even with those high numbers. I'm going to take you through each article, and I'll try to go pretty quickly. The first article, which is the biggest article in our budget, is regular instruction. That includes teacher salaries and benefits, teacher supplies, professional development. Just a slight change in this, even though we actually do have a lot of position changes. We're adding a teacher in grade 1 and grade 4 this year, but we're reducing a teacher in grade 3. We're reducing an English language learner teacher and reading recovery. That's a one-time position. We're eliminating some additional teachers we had added as one-year positions in kindergarten and grade 5. All the teacher additions and reductions are due to class sizes, primarily. There's one exception to that, and that's grade 4, and I will get to that as well in a bit. And then we decreased professional development kind of across the board in the SAD budget to keep it down. We did have to pay for an extra ed tech in our budget this year, even though it was an addition in staffing. It was an oversight in last year's budget. So we've had the position for a long time, but it was left out of the budget last year. And we are going to have a new middle school math program next year. That's also budgeted for. The next article is special ed. That includes the personnel who work in the special ed department, as well as all their supplies, professional development, contracted services, tuition payments. We had about a 4.5% increase in that line. The wages go up every year, and oftentimes health also goes up almost every year. We had to move an ed tech into our local budget that we had paid for through federal local entitlement funds in the past. And the reason that happened is because our expenses in special ed that we have to cover through local entitlement are increasing. And that's mostly the support services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, and the needs for those services for students in our schools is increasing. And there's no longer space to cover an ed tech salary in our local entitlement funds. So we're having to shift some of that we used to be able to pay and save taxpayers some of our regular expenses through local entitlement. We can't do that as much anymore. We're also increasing our contingency in special ed from $35,000 to $50,000, and that's a fund we set aside in case we have some unexpected private placements that we need to make during the year. Other instruction includes co-curricular and athletics and summer school. And this is a 7% increase, although the overall amount is not that high, but it's mostly due to new stipends. Wages of those stipends increase every year. We've had a little bit of an increase in athletic supply line and some increase in dues and fees for athletics. Student and staff support. This includes technology, the library, counseling services, instructional training. Not a big change there. It's mostly due to increases in wages and health. We actually did also decrease money we're allocating for coursework for teachers in this line as well. System administration includes the central office and the school board. There's a slight decrease in that line. There were some changes in health elections. We actually are adding a new position in our central office that will be a half-time communications and development director. And that position will be a half-time position that's shared between the two districts. So each district pays a quarter of a full-time equivalency. We also reduce professional development and travel in this line, and we had a savings in this line, and this is a lot of the reason why we had a slight decrease. Last year we had budgeted $25,000 to do live streaming for our meetings, and we didn't need to budget that this year. So that was a savings for us in this line. The next article is school administration. again, modest increase of 3.3%. Again, increases in wages always impact our budget. We have a little bit of increased time for secretarial support at the elementary school, and we also reduce professional development. We reduce professional development across the boards for teachers and administrators. Transportation really isn't changing a whole lot. Last year, we had a bus leases. We don't have any bus purchases or leases this year. We are adding a bus monitor on one elementary school run in the afternoon as a pilot program to see what a difference it makes to have some support for the bus driver to manage the 40 kids who are behind him or her while she's driving the bus. So we'll see how that works. I won't be surprised if over time that expands a little bit. I actually can't believe it's not a legal requirement that we have another adult on a school bus, but we'll see how that goes. I think it's a lot of responsibility for a bus driver to watch the road and the 40 students at the same time. So we also have to have 7 additional school days next year to transport the middle school because the middle school students will be going to school on 7 days when other schools aren't in session, which also means they won't be going to school for 7 days when the other schools are in session. So there's no net gain or loss of the total number of days, but we have to be done at the middle school next year on June 5th, which is much earlier than we're typically done with school. And we don't have any flexibility on that end date. So we have eliminated most of February vacation. We've eliminated the couple days before Thanksgiving vacation. Students at the elementary school will be going between Christmas and New Year's for 2 days. So they've got a few days that they're going to go to school when nobody else is, and so that they can get out on June 5th. So it'll be painful during the year, but it will be very exciting on June 5th.
That due to the construction?
What's that?
That because of the construction?
Because of construction. So they need the extra time to demolish the current building and build the bus loop and the stuff in front of the building, and they just don't have enough time if we didn't give them some extra weeks. And then we have a small reduction in our mechanic wages in that line as well. Our ops and maintenance line is just about a 4% increase. We had to budget for $50,000 of moving expenses, and that is the cost of moving out of the current school and into the new school. That's all the teachers, books, equipment, supplies, all of that stuff. We also are adding 2 unisex bathrooms at the elementary school. Our capital reserve line is going to be $125,000 going into that. It's about what it was last year. We are budgeting to do some engineering work to look at the possibility of doing a secondary egress that connects the elementary and the high school that will enable both the elementary and the high school to have a second way off their campus if we connect the two. So we're looking at that as a safety measure. And this line also has absorbed a significant increase in electricity charges, not from use, but just from the cost of electricity. Next line is debts and other commitments. And this is a significant increase, 25%. So you can see the first line, the MET bond payment for next year will be $477,316. And that is part of that $4.9 million. We are doing a 20-year bond, and that's our first payment. We also have a slight increase in our middle school bond payment. Last year, we moved the principal payment to our, to pay for the cost of construction when the project came in over bid, so we didn't pay our first principal payment. We also, if people might have been there, so they might remember, we had a big meeting in the gymnasium the day before the town vote last year. There were about 600 residents between Camden and Rockport that attended that meeting to vote on all of the things we needed to do to come up with the money to pay for the rest of the building that we've, the project came in over budget. And one of those things was to take a $3 million bond premium that was part of the $5 million that we needed to come up with. Well, that bond premium was approved the night before the vote, and warrants were written, and there wasn't enough time to actually get the cost of paying back that bond premium into our budget. So this year, we had a pretty big expense, $268,000 in the bond premium payment for interest that we hadn't budgeted. So next year, we're gonna pay that, and we're budgeting for it, a slightly small amount, but we're budgeting for it. But between the principal and that interest, the middle school bond payment is also going to increase. Both of those payments will begin to decrease the following year for the next 20 years. We have a decrease of close to $10,000 in the elementary school debt payment. And we also have a kitchen lease that we are starting to pay for the new middle school. One of the things we did when we did the value engineering process, we saved, $1.4 million or something close to that when we did value engineering. And one of the things we did was take out all of the kitchen equipment from the project and decided to lease that equipment instead of having it in the project. So this is reflected right there. We have a 12-year lease on the new equipment for the kitchen, and we're starting to pay that back in next year's budget. What's that? Lease to own. Lease to own, yes. Yes, we don't really lease anything that we don't lease to own, so I forget to say that. But we will own it at the end of the day. And our other costs include board contingency and food service subsidy. We are increasing our food service subsidy by $20,000, but we're also reducing staff hours for a savings of 16. So there's only a slight net increase there. We're also increasing the board contingency by $95,000. And that money right there represents one of the ways that we are going to, quote unquote, pay back ourselves, pay back really the building project for that $268,000 payment that we had to make this year for the premium that was approved that we didn't have time to budget for. We had to pay that bill this year, and we paid it with some of this year's board contingency, and most of it was paid for out of the building contingency. We've had a lot of unfortunate things that we've had to pay for, like we've had pretty significant unsuitable soils on site, on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars that were unexpected that have come out of our contingency. Because of those unsuitable soils, a pretty technical solution had to be used to backfill the foundation and the retaining wall because of the soils, and that cost an extra like $340,000. And then they weren't able to do that as early in the season as they had hoped, and the winter conditions ended up costing significantly more than we had planned for, and that cost us about an additional $270,000. All of that money has come out of our contingency. So our contingency, we still have about $700,000 left in our contingency, but we can't afford to absorb that premium payment. So we're paying the building contingency back. And so this year we borrowed $203,000 from that building fund to pay that bill. And one of the ways we're helping to pay it back is we took our health savings this year. When we first presented this budget to the board, it was in March, we had budgeted 8% for health insurance. This health insurance came in at 2.4%, and it was a savings of $95,000, $95,260. So instead of putting that back to the taxpayers, we said, let's put that in the board contingency to help pay back the middle school project. So that was kind of our health savings this year. And that's one of the reasons, it is the reason why this is a 79% increase. This is just a snapshot summary of everything that I've just gone through without any of the detail. So it just shows you the change in each of the articles and then the overall change of 8.04%. This chart shows the percent that each article is out of our total budget. And you can see that regular instruction is the highest amount. And, you know, it's unusual for debt service to be as high as it is for a district. And obviously, we have built new schools, and that is the reason, and then we had the MET project on top of it. So we're still paying for the elementary school. We took on the middle school, and then we took on MET. And that translates that 25% of our costs are actually going to debt service. In 20 years, that should be zero, and it will be a really nice feeling if anyone's still around. So our revenue side, we are getting a little bit more money for tuition. That's people paying tuition to us to attend our school. We do have a handful of students from outlying districts whose parents pay tuition to attend our school. And sometimes we have special ed students who pay that cost of special education in addition. That's what this increase is for a special ed student. And then we got an increase in our state subsidy, which was great, and that's because the state last year, for this year's budget, reimbursed us 40% of our special ed costs, and in next year's budget, they're reimbursing us 45% of special ed costs. And that's the difference that makes in the amount of subsidy that they're giving us due to those costs. The state doesn't give us any subsidy for the SAD 28 other than to reimburse that share of special ed costs. So that's the only subsidy we get. But it went up by quite a bit, which was nice. So our revenues went up by 16%. When you put that all together, we have an overall tax increase of 7.26%. And in Camden, that yielded a 3.97% increase to taxpayers. And in Rockport, that yielded an 11.14% increase. The difference in those percentages is completely based on the student count. So I put the student count right beside it, and you can see in this year, Camden has 391 students, K-8, and Rockport has 331.5. They do an average. And next year, Camden will have 278. So that's a decrease of 14 students.
378.
The slide says 378. It should say 278.
No, sorry. I'm seeing 3 and I'm saying 2 apparently. 378. In Rockport was 331, and next year it's going to be 342. So Rockport had an increase of 11 students, and Camden had a decrease of 14.
And that equals a $730,000 increase?
Well, it's, the total increase is the combination of those two, 730 plus 307. That's just the increase in the budget. And the way they're split is based on the relative number of students. And that is the difference it makes. And again, these numbers they come from the state in a formula to us. So we don't determine the share each town pays. Like, we don't calculate that. That's information that the state gives us of the share each town will pay, the amount, and the number of students. And so you can see the estimated cost per 100,000 in each town.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little confused. As a resident, we're still 60 students less than Camden.
This
So-
only shows the increase for next year. Rockport probably does pay overall less. We're only showing the increase in the amount.
Okay.
We're not showing the total amount paid by each town.
Okay.
And then we also show the median single-family home, which is the price is slightly different in each town, and how that will impact the median single-family home. Any other questions on that slide?
It's still so, that's just the increase. That's the 20531 is the increase based on the median single-family home.
Yes, so if you were at the median in Rockport, your taxes for the SAD budget would go up $205.
Okay.
So the overall increase is $1 million, and Rockport pays 2/3 of that, and Camden pays 1/3.
for the increase because of the differential in the number of students from each town. You're gonna see the opposite thing happen at the high school, where Rockport has a significant dip in the number of students, and Rockport has the lowest increase at the CSD. But then these students, there's a larger share of students from Rockport, that's a growing share, it's not larger, but it's shifting, and eventually that's probably gonna hit the high school as well. So right now, there's just a shift in the students from each town.
So, not pertaining to this slide, but I was a little confused as well by this issue with all the money that was spent with this dirt that was a problem.
Yeah?
Can you tell us what the problem with the dirt was?
Yeah. The problem was it wasn't dirt. It was, what do they call them? Stump dumps? Well, it was a combination of things. So they ran into a lot of stump dumps where prior people who built on our land, who probably was prior schools, all the trees that they had cut down, they just buried in swales. And so we ran into a lot of stumps and organic matter. That was one of the parts of our unsuitable soils. And then another part was that most of the soil was a marine clay, which is very difficult to build on. And like if you went out and looked at the site, they had mounds of soft, silky marine clay. So it was a combination of those two things.
So the other part about that was that you paid a significant uplift because of the timing of when it had to be removed? Could it have been delayed?
No, we didn't pay the extra money we had to pay was because when they were using this material called lightweight cellular concrete, they were using that to backfill the retaining walls. And they had thought they were going to start that in November, and they didn't start that until January, primarily because we had a lot of rain in the fall, and then it snowed in November. We had a really difficult weather season, so they started later than they thought they were going to. Because they did, they were a lot slower. They were working in 0 to 20-degree temperatures, took them longer. They had to build this massive structure. The lightweight concrete fill had to be between a certain temperature, the ambient air. They had to heat inside the structure they had to build. So everything was much more intensive than they thought it would be. And they couldn't not do that, because if they waited until it was like this time of year, there were two problems with that. One, we would have caused a delay in the project, which would have cost us even more money. And two, the lightweight cellular concrete guys had us on their schedule, and we had no guarantee that they would come back. And I don't know if people are aware of what's happening in the construction industry right now, but if you don't get the subcontractors when they're scheduled to come, you might not get them for another year. So we couldn't take that risk of not having them come back, and we would have delayed the project.
I do have a question, if I might. With regards to the tuition students, how many do we have?
I think we maybe have 4 or 5 maybe at the SAD 28.
Okay, I'm just wondering whether, and the 95,000, so that equates to 20-some-odd thousand dollars per person we're getting for
No, the
tuition.
$95,000 that we had for tuition,
I'm trying to figure out whether the rate that we're getting for reimbursement for tuition from people that are coming here equates to the same that we're spending for kids that live here.
well, the answer to that question is no. Let me just explain this for a minute in special education, that, actually, I don't have that tuition was on there.
That's fine, you answered it
The
already.
tuition is we're getting a large increase in tuition because people who are tuitioning for special ed needs do pay the full cost of special ed. That's a lot more than we're typically, that might be $40,000 we're getting for that special ed student to pay for services. Again, the state dictates what tuition you can charge, and we charge just over $10,000, and our cost is probably 16 to 17.
Thank you.
Yep. But we get that money in from tuition, and we have no additional costs because of it. So it's all revenue for us. So other budget information, our fund balance or the budgetary balance is $1.9 million. Most of that we have to keep in a fund in order to have money if our district shut down. We have to pay our teachers over the summer months after the district would have closed. So we have to keep a balance of over $1 million for that. So we actually have about 102,000 in our unassigned balance. In our capital reserve at the end of this year, we'll have just over $250,000. And we project at the end of next year, we'll have about 375. Because we're adding 125 and we're not planning to use any of that money next year. Our capital reserve actually also has $1.5 million in it that was earmarked from that meeting last year at this gym with 600 people to help pay for the project. So we're not really counting that in this capital reserve. It's already allocated for the middle school. We will have a capital reserve warrant article that will need to be approved at the May meeting. And that would be to let us transfer $75,000 from unexpected balances to the capital reserve fund and expend up to $200,000 from that reserve fund for unexpected or emergency school facility capital needs, of which we expect to have none, but you never know. This budget adds a teacher in grade 1 to maintain class size policy. We added a teacher in grade 4 based on parent input. We are planning for anticipated expenses in the building project and the MET project. We basically eliminated professional development for administration and reduced it for teachers. And we also increased the efficiency of our food service operation. What it doesn't do is provide for possible extra kindergarten teacher, which sometimes happens in the summer. We get a flurry of registrations that we weren't expecting, and all of a sudden we need another teacher to keep our class sizes within policy. We do not expect to need that this year. Our registration numbers are low, and this year, for the students entering kindergarten, their births were about 30% lower for that year at Penn Bay than they have been for the past 10 years. So I expect a very small kindergarten class this year. And we didn't plan for adding a preschool program, which may be a requirement, but the state's kind of been going back and forth. They were going back and forth this year. We hedged our bets that we weren't going to be required to do it, so we didn't include any money for it, and we won't need to. We know now that we don't need to do it. So that's the SAD budget. Does anybody have any other questions they'd like to ask about that budget before we move on to the Five-Town CSD?
One quick one on the electricity costs that you mentioned
Yep.
going up quite a bit. Has there been any consideration at all of solar or power purchase agreements or anything like that to help mitigate that cost?
You know, we've talked about it, you know, in this district, we're building a new school, and we've talked about solar at this school and maybe doing a power purchase agreement, but that didn't work out in the planning of this. We do have the capacity to install solar if we want to. We've thought about, like, you know, should we buy into a solar farm? So we are looking at that. It just hasn't, time hasn't been right. As you know, we do that at the high school. But at the high school, our capacity charge and electricity charges are also going up. So we haven't done that yet. With a power purchase agreement, it'd probably be less capital outlay. We're outlaying so much money right now in the SAD that it's hard to do anything extra.
Anybody have any additional questions? Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to run through the Five-Town CSD. It's in the exact same format as the SAD was. The mission of the Five-Town CSD is a learning community that fosters intellectual and creative excellence while building strong character. The bottom line at the CSD is we have an expense budget increase of 2.89%, and that is yielding a taxpayer impact of 4.02%. And that is higher there because we've had a reduction in our revenues. And we'll get to that later. But that's the bottom line, is 4.02% to taxpayers. These are our 10-year enrollments at the high school, and we have our projected enrollment for next year on there as well. And you can see they've stayed pretty steady the past 4 years. And that really represents an increase due to St. George students. We have about, I bet there are maybe 36 St. George students in our high school right now that pay tuition, and we have a handful from Northport, and then a handful from some other random towns around us. But some schools have school choice around us, like Northport and St. George, and we get a lot of students from those schools. And then we have some whose parents just pay tuition to send their children to us. So that, we've maintained the levels we're at now because we have so many tuition students at the high school. Our expense budget at the high school this year, as I said, is 2.89%, and our 10-year average is 2.06%. And the change to the taxpayer this year is 4.02, and the 10-year average is 2.75. And there's one thing that I want to point out. If I had a little red dot, I could have pointed to the line, and you could have seen it easily. But if everybody goes and finds 2017, and they look at the change to the taxpayer, and they notice how different that is from all the other years, because it's negative 4.51%. That year was the year when our communities felt the relief from the high school kind of being paid off. The high school's not paid off yet, but that year the state started subsidizing our debt service almost entirely. So we were paying like $800,000 a year in debt service. It was going down a little bit each year because of the interest. And then in 2017, the state started giving us like $775,000 for that payment in subsidy. So we saw a huge relief because they started paying us back for the debt service. Next, so we have finished paying off the interest. Next year, it's a principal payment only. And we have 2 more years to pay the high school. It'll be done in November of 2021. When it's in next year, we don't have an interest payment anymore. So in next year's budget, the state is subsidizing 100% of our principal payment that we're making. So once we're done paying the principal, the state will also be done subsidizing us for our principal payment. There'll be a net zero. Nothing, taxpayers won't feel a thing. Because right now, we're essentially not really paying for the debt service any longer. We stopped, quote unquote, in 2017. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who think like, oh, we can't wait for the high school to be paid off, and then our taxes will go down. They went down in 2017. So they won't go down for that reason in the future. So regular instruction at the high school, there was about a 5% increase. We have a new thing that's happening next year at the high school called the Hatchery. It's an innovation center that we are developing and starting next year. And we have increased costs due to that idea. We are paying for some of it through current costs and making sacrifices, and we're also adding some to the budget to pay for the hatchery. We also have our wage increases for staff. Our health increases are budgeted at 7% in this district because we didn't get the information till after the budget was approved by the board. The increase actually came in at 0%, so we will have some money in this budget that was unexpected that we most likely will just put to our fund balance at the end of the year. So the hatchery is an innovation center. Our tagline is where ideas are nurtured and hatched. And the basic components of the hatchery will be that we're going to offer coursework to students. We're actually going to be in a partnership with a school called NuVu. It's NUVU. That's a school in Cambridge. It's a high school whose entire curriculum is innovation. They're going to send up an innovation coach to help us get started, and they also offer a lot of professional development and other resources. We're going to create a makerspace in the current industrial arts room. We're going to redesign that to be a makerspace, and we hope to integrate a lot of what we're doing with the community. We're going to have some cafe nights that will be open to students and community members that will bring in speakers around innovation topics. We also plan to have a speaker series that might look something like a local How I Built This series. If anyone's listened to that on NPR, Saturday mornings, they have How I Built This, and it's all kinds of entrepreneurs about how they started their businesses. So the community integration, a lot of that will happen, not next year, but the year after. We actually have a really robust advisory board that's established to help us with the hatchery. We've been talking a lot, we've been talking to people at the Innovation Center in the Fab Lab at UMaine Orono. We've met with professors who do sustainable business at College of the Atlantic. We've met with professors from UNH. We've done an innovation tour in Boston of all kinds of innovation centers down there. We've met with all the town managers in our 5 towns to let them know what we're doing and try to really facilitate that community piece. So we've been doing a lot of work around establishing this. We also hope through our makerspace to offer some short courses that maybe some of them would run through adult ed, like how to use a 3D printer, how to use a laser cutter, so that our students can learn how to use the equipment and they can come and use the space anytime that they're free, and would like the community to be able to use our space as well. Special education at the high school is increasing almost 9%. We have an increased we have a private tuition payment of $35,000 that we didn't budget. That's for a student who's an out-of-district placement. We reduced our contingency at the high school, our special ed contingency. We had to move a Zenith tutor from local entitlement to the regular budget for the exact same reasons why we did at the SAD. The SAD was an ed tech. This one is a person who's a tutor with the Zenith program, and we can just no longer afford to pay him out of our federal money because of all the other required services that students need. And then we've also had increases in wages. Our Midcoast program assessment is just a modest increase of $5,000. It's 8.27%. You might remember that we no longer pay, the state pays the Midcoast bill essentially at this point. All we pay is the amount over the EPS formula. So this line used to be over $1 million for us, and now it's $67,000, which was a nice reduction. It coincidentally happened the same year that Midcoast debt service, that we started having to pay back for the new Midcoast building. And that was almost a wash between what the state's paying for the regular program and what we're now paying for the debt service. Other instruction was a 5% increase. We've got athletic and activity increases, and contracted services are increasing just the cost of officiating. Student and staff support decreased a little bit. We've had reduced costs. We're not leasing or having non-lease purchases, mostly computer devices. A little bit of an increase in curriculum software, and we have a little bit of an increase. We're doing a couple of equity initiatives that cost money. One of them is that we're providing the PSAT for all sophomores so that every student has the opportunity to be equally prepared when they take the state test their junior year, which is the SAT. So this year, because in the past, some of our students can take the PSAT and some of them can't. They have to pay for it themselves, but we're going to do that as a school next year. System administration, that most of that 7% increase is because of that position I told you about, the Director of Development and Communications. School administration is because somebody, probably changed from individual to family health insurance, and we had some wage increases. Transportation basically isn't changing. We did just sign a new contract with Loose Transportation, but there's no increase for next year in that, and the SAD is basically staying the same. Ops and maintenance line, tiny increase. Even though we are paying increased electricity costs due to higher energy delivery and capacity charges, we're reducing our contracted repairs. We're going to put some money in the capital reserve, but we're also going to spend some money there. Debts and other commitments is going down, and that's because every year our CTE debt service will go down. And we also are no longer paying interest for the high school payment. So that also, those two decreases contributed to that $70,000 decrease. But we got to remember, we're getting subsidized for almost half of that amount of money.
Can we go back to that for just one second? I'm sorry. So I'm a little confused on this as well. You said that you're getting a payment of like, wasn't it 700 and something thousand from the state?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly how much it is, but it's, I mean, I don't know if, JC, if you have it at the top of your head, but whatever we're paying in our debt service is equivalent to what the state is subsidizing us for the high school's building. And then for Midcoast, there are two things. Midcoast's regular costs, and the state's paying for that off the top. Now, our share used to be $1.1 million. Now the state's paying for that off the top, and we're only charged, like, the total assessment for all the towns that send is like $200,000, and our share of that is 67. So that was a big change at the state level. At the exact same time, the new school was voted on, approved, they started building, and our share of that debt for the new building is $800 and something thousand, I think, and we're not getting subsidized for that.
Okay, so that's why it's just a wash, really.
Well, that's why the Midcoast equation is a wash. And the
Okay.
high school equation is a wash. It will be a total wash when we stop paying, because the state will also stop paying for us. So we have two different things going on. We got the high school debt payment in that situation and Midcoast, and both of them are kind of just a wash.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Other costs, it's not a large dollar amount, but it's increasing 12%, and that's for another equity initiative. We're providing free breakfast and lunch for students who are on reduced lunch. We just want to make sure that no kids are hungry at school. We're also providing food for students. After school, we're going to have a room that's basically full of nutritional food options. And students will be able to go in after school if they're waiting for sports, theater, whatever they might be waiting for, and they're hungry and they don't have enough money to bring extra food to school. They can just go in this room and get a snack. And if they need food for the weekend, they can go in on a Friday and get themselves food for the weekend. We are not asking taxpayers to fund that, though. That's being funded through a different source of money. But that's one of the equity initiatives that we're doing in addition to these things that are costing us money. So again, this is a summary of all the lines that I just went through, and it yields a 2.89% increase in our expense budget. The debt service percentage at the high school is not as high as it is in the SAD 28 district, but that just shows you kind of how the money's divided. Our revenue line, we have a decrease of 2.51% in our revenues. Our tuition is going to go down a little bit next year. We're probably going to have one or two fewer students attending our school paying tuition. The year after that, I actually predict a pretty big increase, because we actually, right now, our classes next year, there'll be 5 seniors from St. George, and the classes behind them are like 9, 11, and 12. So we've been getting a lot more, and if 12 incoming freshmen replace those 9 outgoing seniors, that's a lot of extra revenue in tuition. And then we had our state subsidy went down a little bit, and that's because of the debt service going down. So taxpayer impact per town, you can just take a minute to look at that. You can see that Rockport has the lowest, well, Appleton actually has the lowest, because they've got a negative. They've got a decrease in their assessment. Of the people who have an increase, Rockport has the lowest at the high school of 2.10%. And for Camden and Rockport, at the high school, Camden and Rockport's share of the assessment is based on the relative number of students they're sending to the high school and nothing else. For Hope, Appleton, and Lincolnville, it's based on their changes in valuation and nothing else. So for some of the towns, it's based on population, and that's because those 2 towns are minimum receivers. And the other 3 towns, it's based on valuation. And again, the state gives us this information. At the high school, the fund balance is $1.2 million with about 14,000 unassigned. Capital reserve is a little higher at the high school. It's $576,802 right now. Next year, at the end of the year, we expect it to be 601. We do have a capital reserve warrant article. It's very similar to the SADs, except that it also includes 2 items that we plan to spend out of the capital reserve next year. One is an engineering study that looks at heat recovery to try to recover some heat out of our ventilation system. We're going to look at that to see if we can save money in costs over time, and then to also renovate the industrial arts room into a makerspace. We also have adult ed. Adult ed's budget doesn't change a whole lot in any given year. It's just going to be a 0.8% increase. The total amount of money is $407,000. There is going to be a decrease in the assessment due to adult ed, however, for every town, because the state is giving us a little bit more money in adult ed subsidy, and we're just giving that back to the taxpayers. So there's a slight decrease there, but the overall dollar amount isn't nearly what it is for the schools. So this budget supports the opening of the hatchery while balancing other priorities, and it uses some existing resources and some new ones to do that. It funds equity initiatives, and it efficiently anticipates needs in technology and facilities. We don't fully fund the media position in 1920, but the plan is to build that back up in 2021 to full-time. So we had an opening in a media position at the high school, and we decided to only fund that half-time so that we could put some of that money toward the hatchery to get that started. Our next steps are actually just the bottom 2. We have the town budget hearing next week, May 21st, 6 o'clock for the SAD and 7 o'clock for the CSD in Strom Auditorium. And then we have the town vote, and that will vote on all the articles. And then the town vote will be on June 11th to vote on the overall budget. Are there any questions on the 5-town CSD?
Questions at all?
Thanks for your patience and your time. I know it takes a while to get through that, but hopefully you found the information useful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have possible land transfer to Maine Water. We have some information on that, and Rick, if you want to summarize that, that would be great.
Yeah, several months ago, we were approached by Maine Water having to do with a parcel of land that the town received as taxable, tax deeded property back in the early 90s, I believe. And it's landlocked, a landlocked piece of land that is near Mirror Lake, and fits right into the larger conservation easement for the Round the Mountain Trail. And it just seemed like it didn't make any sense for us to maintain ownership of it. And there were some confusing pieces that had to do with some surveys, I think, that you were doing, Rick?
Correct.
Yeah. So there was, it seemed like the solution to this was to just exercise the town's ability to just transfer the land as a tax deeded property is in accordance with Article 29, which allows the town to do this. And solve Maine Water's issue and get the land into the larger parcel that's the round the mountain trail, correct?
Almost.
Almost correct? Pretty close.
Yeah.
So, Rick?
I can add some context for you. My name's Rick Knowlton. I'm with Maine Water. I'm glad Maria set us up because now that we can do all the high finance associated with this transaction. The town actually did acquire this 3.5 acre piece in '92 due to the lack of payment of a $41 tax bill. And when we were working with the Coastal Mountain Land Trust on the easements around Mirror Lake and Grassy Pond, we actually split that into two pieces. So the easement that we concluded last September was on the north side of Route 17 on all the acreage around Mirror Lake, which is the predominant location of the Round the Mountain Trail. Currently, we're working on the easement to the south of Route 17, which is our land holdings around Grassy Pond. And the first step in this easement process is to agree on what the land is that the easement will cover. So we spent a lot of money with surveyors. The surveyors came to us and said, oh, well, we got one little problem. Actually, we have 3 or 4 problems, and this is one of them. This piece, as it sits today, does not have clear boundaries. It is one of 3 slices that a family put together so many years ago, decades ago. And the surveyors told us, you're gonna need a boundary line agreement with the town of Rockport, who's the owner of the parcel now, to clean this all up. And for us, that's problematic because our holdings and the indentures that capture those holdings to do simple things like boundary line agreements require us to go back to all of our bondholders to agree that it's okay with them. The expense of doing that, we thought perhaps we could sit down with the town of Rockport and say, our hope would be in lieu of spending money on surveyors and lawyers, you might be interested in taking this piece that I believe you have in your packet. It's a long skinny piece. It's 1,000 feet long and 100 feet wide, surrounded on 3 sides by Maine Water Company's holdings. And our proposal was to see if you would deed that piece to us, which we then in turn will roll into the easement that we give to Coastal Mountain Land Trust for this property. So it will indeed become part of the protected property. There are indeed plans for expansion of the trails.
Yeah.
So
on the
it
wrong
may in
side
fact,
of the
it may in
17.
fact tie into that, but we have not laid out the trails around Grassy Pond at this point. And our hope was that this is a better way for us collectively to spend our resources than to pay for lawyers and bond counsel and land surveyors.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yep.
I move to approve for consideration at a future meeting the land transfer to Maine Water Company pending recommendations from the Planning Board and Conservation Commission as stated in Article 28 of the town warrant.
One correction, it should be
29.
29.
Well, 29 has wastewater. That's, I think 28 is probably.
Oh,
No, we have- 29 is,
Says real estate
Oh, yeah,
acquired
you're
by
right,
the
you're
town
right.
for
Okay,
non-payment of
yeah.
wastewater. 28, I think, is the one that's correct.
you're right, okay. So we have the motion.
My second is read.
Okay.
So now the question is,
Seconded.
do we have any idea when they're going to be meeting next so that we can,
No, it'll
this
have to
off
go
our
to
plate.
them. I think it's more the Conservation Commission is meeting fairly regularly, but it's the Planning Board that would be the one that would, they haven't been meeting.
Yeah, they have been.
Yeah, it's the ZBA that hasn't been meeting, it's the
Right.
planning board's been meeting, so I think that,
It'll be in the next month or, it would, sometime in the next month, I would imagine.
just trying to give an idea for
Yeah.
Rick to be able to,
Yeah,
Work
our schedule on the transaction, we're hoping to close before the end of June.
I would think that would be possible.
absolutely.
We've got a meeting on the 28th, I don't know whether those two boards will meet
Right.
before our meeting on the 28th or not, but
I think conservation will be.
Conservation meets on June 12th and planning
Yep.
board meets on June 26th.
June or May? June? June?
Now, is there one this month? Yeah, actually, May 22nd, there's a planning board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next week.
So we have that one. So we have a meeting scheduled on May 28th. My
28th.
guess is that we're probably going to need at least one more meeting before town meeting for some other reasons. And if not, then the new select board would meet the last Monday in June, so that would fit in with the timing, I think. Because I would think certainly by the end of June, we should have the approval that we need. And I don't see any problems with this.
So is this where we ask Rick to go over those board
Right, I'll
chairs
forward
and
it to the boards.
provide them the information that we have so that they can,
Yep.
Get it on their agendas.
and the urgency is also to be noted, I suspect.
I think the Conservation Commission will certainly want to know about
Yeah.
the fact that it's gonna be going into conserved land and an easement and things like that, so, we wanna make sure we pass that along, but it's, yeah, it seems to make all the sense in the world to do this. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a 5-0 vote.
I keep forgetting that you're not living local, or I'd have had you bumped up on the schedule. Sorry about
No, it's quite all right. You know, the budget's fascinating at the school.
that. And she does a great job.
Yeah,
Last year
absolutely.
was good, and this year was better, so.
And we'll work on the fire issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're a good
Thanks for
man.
coming in,
It's
Rick.
not your problem, it was our problem.
Thanks.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Safe
Thank you.
travels, man.
next item on the agenda is a discussion of Harbor Committee member changes. This item came up in liaison reports in a previous meeting, and we now have a recommendation in front of us from the chair of the Harbor Committee and also the manager's recommendation as to some motions that we should make regarding this situation.
Mr. Chairman, I move to declare the position previously held by Sadie Samuels on the Harbor Committee as vacant in accordance with the Harbor Committee bylaws.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this at all? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That's a 5-0 vote.
Mr. Chairman, second move, I move to appoint Cheryl Lickety as a full member of the Harbor Committee for a term to expire June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Typically, when we appoint somebody, we'd have them here to talk to us. A couple of us know Cheryl and know that she's.
Cheryl has also been an alternate member since last November
Yep.
and was fully vetted out at that point in time.
Yeah, good. With that said, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Okay, that's a 5-0 vote. That takes care of that one.
Is there anything we need to do on that, Rick, as far as letter confirmation?
You can just let her know that, but Linda takes care of,
Okay,
Linda and Diane will take care of moving her to a full,
Well, there should be a letter to Sadie
yeah, I
also.
think there
Right.
should be.
yeah, you mean to Sadie?
Yeah, there should be a letter to
Okay.
both of the people that we've impacted tonight with the
All right.
motion that we just passed.
Will do.
And I think it's important to say that Sam Temple's comments that we had in our packet talked about if Sadie gets to the point where she can commit more time, he'd be happy to recommend her to rejoin the Harbor Committee if she can attend meetings at a future time, so. All about meeting attendance. Okay, the next item was on the agenda, at the request of Mark, a discussion of possible traffic calming issues at some locations in Rockport. Rick, do you wanna sort of summarize your comments here?
Yeah, there were two locations, and both locations, the one was at the intersection of West Street and Pascal, and the other one is at the intersection of Calderwood, I think it was Calderwood, right,
No.
Mark? No,
No.
Beauchamp
Beauchamp and Russell.
and Russell. And the issue of the one on Pascal is a state road, and we'd need state permission for that, and what we got was a no from Dave Allen. And also the record,
Who's Dave Allen?
he's the highway engineer for this area.
All right, thank you.
Didn't he say, if I remember reading his email correctly, that if you're only doing it to slow vehicles down for speeding, then he would not recommend it? But if there were a safety aspect, then he would, which is what I had mentioned, because the safety aspect comes in the people coming and going from Rayers because of their constricted area for parking. So that was the sort of the side piece to the safety aspect of it. It's not just to slow people down. I mean, obviously, that would be a given.
So can I
That-
make a
that could-
comment on that?
If you'd come up to the.
Introduce yourself and where you live and all that.
We didn't look at it that way,
Good stuff.
and we didn't ask that question that way. We thought it was just for speed, controlling speed.
So, yeah, if you want to make a
Yeah,
comment.
so that's an interesting,
So most of you know me, I'm Jason Haynes. Raymond and I own Rare. The issue is pretty significant. There is a lot of issues with regards to people getting in and out of the parking. However, with regards to adding a stop sign, we basically did a very informal, impromptu survey of our neighbors. Nobody wants a stop sign at all. We all think it would be really detrimental to our homes, from people basically stopping and then restarting. We already have enormous noise from the trucks on our street. To increase the noise would be really detrimental to all of our property value. One of the neighbors said that he thinks that the best solution would be for us to simply buy a camera that would then ticket people. It would have radar capability and ticket people that are speeding. That eliminates the need for the police to actually be there to give tickets, and something that we could set up, and we could actually make some revenue from it. And it would stop the problem of the speeding. The other issue was with regards to adding a speed bump, one of the more extensive ones where there's a slope up, then it's leveled off, and then going down. That was something that nobody really wanted either, because of the noise that it would cause and just the hindrance of it. So that's where pretty much all of us are at the moment.
And I know in the past they'd done surveys through the machinery that Camden has, and the perception of speeding was not as great when you provide factual numbers. So we know that it does happen, but it doesn't happen as frequently as some people might think it does. So would more of a presence over in that area when they're free, would that help?
We have seen a definitive decrease in speeding when the police are present, yes. And people see that there are tickets being given. What we were the idea came from Peter Hall, and I thought his idea was really great because the police can't be there all the time,
Right.
but this machine could. And if people knew that it was there, they would certainly stop speeding. That's definitely a plus. You want to say something, Raymond?
Lower the speed limit.
Oh, yes.
Lower the speed limit, then people can.
I need you to come up if you're going to speak,
Sure.
so the folks at home can hear you.
I'll just stay with you.
I think the cheapest and easiest solution would be just to change the speed limit to a lower speed limit, so that way when people speed, they're only speeding to a certain level above that speed limit rather than the speed limit it's at right now.
Because we know that everybody does speed,
Everybody speed, that's what the judge said when I went in.
and they do speed. So, they add the 10, and they think, well, we can do 40.
I mean, that is something that we could request for them to look at that. I mean, it is 35, right?
no, it's
30,
30.
30.
It's 30 is pretty high for that short section.
That's a state decision also.
Yeah.
We have nothing to do with that. We can make the request.
We do need to be careful, because we've done that before, and the state will come in, there's times, depending on traffic conditions, sight distances and things, where they come in and they say, actually, the speed should be higher, which is not an end result we want. So there's some roads where they've done that, they've looked, and Dave has said, if you want me to push this, we're gonna, we'll come back and we'll say it should actually be 35.
So is that something you could speak to them and see if they would review
Dave-
that?
Dave, you can get a sense from Dave?
It's not gonna go up,
Yeah, I don't think, I don't think it'll go down either.
Well, you don't know unless you ask.
Yeah.
What else has the state got to do?
Well, I think all we can do is reiterate to the police chief that,
Well, I think
some presence there when we can is
there is
great.
there is the machinery that they have affixed to a pole that actually says what the speed is.
Right.
And it shows what you're traveling, which has been an effective tool.
Yeah, that
When
is
I see
effective.
it.
We actually used that to ticket a speeder, because there was somebody on the street that said there was somebody speeding every morning, and they didn't have an exact time. Well, with that piece of equipment, we were able to get a pretty close time. They were going through there every day at the same time. And they were able to ticket somebody based on, because they sat there and waited for
Yeah,
them.
then they have to go there. But
So, and maybe that is another idea, that we can get a schedule made up with Camden so that we can share the equipment between there and here, so that it's,
But it doesn't take a picture of the license
No,
plate and ticket.
no, but just to have the sign out there that just you're doing this.
right, the speed limit's this,
Can
you're
make a
doing
difference.
this, slow down.
But I know the kind of machine that you're talking about, but I don't know that we use any of
That's
those around
not-
here, and there's all kinds of,
that's
there's all
not even-
kinds of issues and legal issues that, you know, I know.
That's what Raymond was saying.
Yeah.
That he thought there were legal issues with regard to that.
Well, and just to be clear too, we don't get any revenue from speeding tickets in Rockport. It all goes.
Oh, we
to the-
don't.
It all goes to the state.
Oh,
Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mark. You would know better than I.
No, it does.
Yeah.
And that's a state dictate
Okay.
because they didn't want towns to become speed traps.
If we all stopped writing tickets around the state for a week, they would cry.
Yeah, right. So we don't see that revenue, and I asked the state representative about it one time, and he said, that's what you have revenue sharing for, and we all know what happened to that.
Yeah.
well, thank you.
Anyway,
Well-
let's just keep the conversation going and see what we can do to help make the situation better.
The other one I would say that we do have a bit of control over.
We do.
Yep, and I sort of wished, I realize Randy's not available, but I do know his predecessor. When you take Route 52 in Camden and Route 105 in the connecting street of Gold Street, then Chief Phil Roberts received complaints of people speeding up and down the road as a shortcut cut coming into town and leaving town. So they did install on Gould Street a speed limit stop sign on the uphill and downhill side to curb speeding. Lime Rock Street over by the old Tibbetts, for instance, was another one that Phil installed years ago, and that was because people were using that, taking the right-hand turn coming off of Union, going the back way down to Bayview Street and Chestnut Street. So I know that we do have that ability, and even though it might not be a state-recommended thing, I know in the past, Doug and even some of his neighbors have complained about people using that road as a shortcut coming and going from Camden, and the speeding that goes on, and that's a 25 zone. So that's something perhaps we do have a little more control over.
Right, it is a completely different kettle of fish, and in the way of full disclosure, I live on Russell Avenue, so, but again, the town does have control over these local roads, and when I think also Maggie Timmerman has requested a stop sign over on Rockville Road at the intersection of Rockville and South Street, and that certainly is a road that gets a lot of through traffic and a fair amount of speeding. I think Jason may have hit the nail on the head, though, with sometimes these stop signs. You know, if you have trucks going through, they're hitting the air brakes and then accelerating again. But the beauty of these being town-controlled roads is, you know, if it doesn't work out and people start complaining about noise and everything else, well, we'll just take the sign down. So I guess I'm in favor of at least exploring putting one up and seeing what happens.
I think the email we have from Randy in our packet actually makes a good suggestion. That is that we probably ought to establish a process as to how we would evaluate these various locations around town to do that, because as he says, you know, if you don't have a process, then you're gonna get all kinds of requests, and all of a sudden, we're gonna have stop signs all over town, and areas that some may be appropriate, and others maybe not so much so.
Knowing that they already have some instituted in Camden, it would have helped to have his recommendation come along with documentation that they have, that they use, rather than us reinventing the wheel.
Talk-
Well, I don't know, you know, that, I understand process, and I think it's a good idea, but again, I know that on Russell Avenue, there's been a fair amount of talk among the neighbors, they'd like to try something, and I know Maggie has spoken about Rockville Street, and, I don't know, I mean, you know, what we're basically saying is let's look at procedure and process for doing this, and then it never happens, you know, I've been there, done that.
Does anybody want to take any further action on this item, other than the information that we've gathered? Hearing nothing, then I guess we'll move on at this point. The next item is discussion of transition plan to the new town manager. Rick's put some comments in the packet for us, and I had brought this up when we met the week before I was out of town, just to get the idea that we want to have something, and so Rick has said that he's going to prepare a document, and I would suggest that some of that document may not be available to the select board if it contains confidential personnel issues, that would be.
I would suggest that we just break it up into two documents.
That's right.
Yeah, one is the nuts and bolts of town business, and the other one, certainly, anything related to personnel or personnel issues is a separate document.
Yep.
That is
From one
retained
manager
and
to the other.
properly, held in confidence under MSRA, you know what, you know what, you know what.
So,
All right, so, I'm sorry, so for the transition document, Rick, as we had discussed, perhaps informally in the past, transition document is something that you should be, my opinion is you should be working on now as things come up to capture them, so that you've got a running list of things that are, I'll call it hangover items between June 30th and July 1st. Things that are gonna be resolved between now and then.
We don't have to worry about, but things that are gonna carry over.
Things that are gonna carry over, and, you know, it's the key points on that item. What, you know, if you were on the receiving end, what would you wanna know about item X? And, obviously pursuant to further discussion, one-on-one or in different formats.
And I would include those items that, you know, might be hanging around and they've been on hold, but can rear their ugly heads again too. You know, I mean, not just anything that's just active now, but
Right.
those as well.
Midcoast Solid Waste is one. I mean, we've got some issues moving
Well, there-
forward there.
Aren't there things, you know, like the agreement for the town attorney? You know, the new police contract will be coming up next year, the agreement with Camden will be coming up next year. So those are all things that should be listed.
yeah, I think
The
a
outline.
department by department listing is
Yeah.
probably a good idea.
Probably a
just
good
go
way to
through it.
approach it, yeah.
Just take a look and say, for the harbor department, here's what's going on in the last year, here's some things that are unfinished, and here's the future
Yeah.
challenges, whatever they may be. I don't think it has to be a tome, but I think it has to be something that can be a good guideline for the new town manager. Okay, any further discussion there?
Nope.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something. Okay. Update on the development of an infrastructure bond. We have the draft minutes in our packet from the Capital Improvement Committee, and along with a lot of detail, actually, in the minutes and things like that. Do we, or the representatives of that
Yep, we
committee?
can do that. I can start, and then Mark can pile in. Short version is we're contemplating putting together a bond package, proposed bond package, not to exceed $1.5 million. And it's to address the longer-term issues primarily around roads and road condition. Where, what did we say, 2/3 of it plus would
Yeah.
be targeted toward road repair.
Reconstruction and repair.
Reconstruction and repair, you know, not annual maintenance, we're talking 10-year plus stuff. Where if we've got a road that just needs an overhaul, it's on the list. We have put together a process, and I talked to Mike, I talked to the Public Works Director tonight. And, we reviewed the criteria that we'd established a couple meetings ago to formally rank these roads with a ranking. Not just 1, 2, 3, but to evaluate the key roads in the town based on traffic, based on overall condition, based on annual maintenance, and to use, basically an index based on those three, 1s, 2s, and 3s, do some math, to come up with a prioritized ranking of roads. So for example, a heavily traveled road in poor condition that requires $75,000 a year in annual maintenance would be right up there on the top of the list. But a road that might be much less traveled or with light traffic, even though their condition were marginal at best, may not end up on the top of the list. So we will, Mike is to rank those and evaluate those, because he knows them, the Public Works Director knows them quite well. And then we've also scheduled a field trip where the committee is going to go out, the Capital Improvement Committee is gonna go out and do some on-site looking and riding around and seeing what's going on.
And the reason some of the shift was diverted back to road construction, reconstruction, and paving is because we have been woefully falling behind. And even if you, like the list that you got, the blue, the 5 streets in blue are what's planned for this year. The listing in green was the wish list, or what we could do if we had $1.2 million. And even doing that, there's still 40 or 45 streets that have to then fall into the mix of paving. So we're not getting ahead by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that's why some of the original infrastructure things that had originally been planned might fall to the wayside. But
There were some big ones that are certainly still on the list.
Yep.
I mean, there's several $100,000 worth of big items, but the proposal is gonna come in more than half certainly on road reconstruction and repair. If you look at the number of miles of road that the town has, and you say, what'd you say, every 7 years, 10 years, 7 years?
I think it's
If you
7.
do 7 years,
Yeah.
it's 1.1 million. If you do
Yep.
10 years, it's 788,000 that we need to
So-
budget annually for paving.
So if we were to redo and maintain roads in the 7 to 10 year window, it would cost us $1 million a year. Just put it all in a cycle through the course of the town.
And looking at your green list again, your first one, Old Rockland Road with no streets, 336,000. Your bottom one, Mechanic Street, including the rebuild of the granite sidewalk, is 249. Those, given the way that we currently fund our highway maintenance, would chew up one budget by itself. So, and there again, if you're only doing one street because you're only budgeting 285, you're falling behind.
Well, I think one of the comments that I took out of the minutes, and I think it was Jeff that made, maybe it was you, Jeff, maybe it was the other Jeff, I don't know, but somebody made the comment that the select board's gonna have to bite the bullet in future years and put more funding into public works.
That was me.
And that's, yeah, that's right, because I think what we don't wanna, we wanna use this bond money, I think, in my opinion, to do the full deep reconstruction of the roads that need it. We don't wanna be borrowing money and paying it off for 10 years when the asset's only gonna last 7 years.
Right.
Right.
But the flip side of that is, I think, just as you suggest, and this is gonna be it's gonna hit people in their wallets. But we're gonna have to spend more money on the roads.
We'll put it together, and obviously there'll be more review and content, discussion. In the end, it goes in front of the voters and the voters decide.
Right.
One thing that wasn't clear to me from looking at the pack, and I'm sorry I don't have it with me tonight, does this include when a road that needs reconstruction has an existing sidewalk with it, does it include the sidewalk being done also?
Yeah, I think it depends on the condition of the sidewalk.
Well,
There's a separate listing of sidewalks in
Right.
here.
Yeah.
like the one from Mechanic Street listed in green does include rebuilding the granite sidewalk. And the one Old Rockland Street had listed with no sidewalk, but there is a separate sheet indicating a sidewalk inventory and its rating.
So that would mean we wouldn't redo that sidewalk over on Old Rockland Road?
I can't answer that.
Well, I think, the way I read it is that the cost estimate doesn't include the sidewalk. Whether we decide to do
Right,
the
right,
sidewalk or not is another question.
Cost estimate, okay.
So the next steps, and we have another meeting scheduled for the 22nd.
Yeah.
Because we know we have to put together details sooner than later, is to have the Public Works Director do the road evaluation and ratings, provide that input to the CIP committee, who will then look at that and figure out, based on rating, condition, travel, the works, and put together a short list of what might be included in the bond as part of the paving portion of it, and road reconstruction portion of it. And then obviously the list of the other things, such as some of the other infrastructure items would be on that list as well. So that the select board can come see that quickly, because if we want to get this on a November ballot, time is of the essence.
What's the date, Megan? It has-
You know, there's something that, Rick, you and I have discussed, and I think that nothing has been advanced on this, but one of the things that some towns do, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, we should make any decision tonight, and, you know, we don't really have a broadband initiative at the moment, which I hope will change in the near future, but the whole idea of when you're working on, you know, doing new roads and new digging, that once you're doing that, it's a very relatively inexpensive thing to stick in some conduit and fiber optic at the same time. And I think, you know, in talking to Fletcher Kittredge, you know, he believes, I mean, he encourages us to do that, and it's kind of foolhardy not, because we've already got the road open up, and the fiber optic is very inexpensive. And so we should be basically, you know,
One's
hooking up
policy.
our town little by little, at least, when we're doing this, anyway. But anyway, I'd like to see us address that at some point, because, I mean, even in the road work we're doing this year, it's crazy for us not to be doing it, in my opinion.
Certainly the cost of conduit is minimal. You can put that in and then put the fiber in later.
Well, no, the fiber is minimal. The fiber
Yeah.
optic itself, it comes in rolls, it's not. And you stick it in there, it's glass, it lasts for, you know, forever.
Cheaper than copper wire.
Yeah, it's just, the whole thing is minimal. It's the labor, and you've already got the, you know, the ground open. It's the time to do it.
So we'll have another report from the Capital Improvement Committee, perhaps on the 28th, and I think, you know, while I'm continuing here, I would like to see that on the agenda every time, because I think the more we talk about it, the more we move it forward, and we get more information each time.
We'd actually invite you all to come if you can.
But it
And
would be a
just-
select board meeting.
And just sit there and listen. Yeah, you can sit and listen, you just can't talk.
Okay, any further discussion on this item?
Nope.
If not, our next item is a quitclaim deed for a taxpayer who is paid up. I have a motion there.
I move to approve the quitclaim deed on property of map 6, lot 71-1, 2016 tax liens, book 5205, page 155, and 2017 tax lien, book 5325, page 62.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? And Linda, they're all up to date on the taxes and everything?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? 5-0 vote. Next item is, on the agenda is consideration of a contract to construct the new Rockport Public Library. Rick has given us some information. Basically, this contract is still in process. We have a draft of the contract in our packet, and I don't know
The
whether,
most recent one, but it's changing still.
I don't know whether we're in a position to approve that this
No.
evening or not.
I don't think so.
The one thing that would be helpful is there's the provision, I sent out an email, I got it very late. I sent out an email, forwarded an email from Asha that one of the things that's out there now as a result of what's been going on, what happened over the weekend with the tariff and a potential trade war, that there was some provision in the contract that if we do get into exceedingly high tariffs as a result of, increases as a result of tariffs that are going on, that there'd be some acceptance of some of that exposure on the part of the town, that they would like us to consider having something like that in the contract.
Who's they?
Five.
Well,
I mean, I think it's an event that's beyond both of our control, the price of steel. If the price of steel goes up dramatically, I think that, what we're gonna have to do at that point is, or the board will have to do is come back and look at the whole project and find the cost someplace else. But I, personally, if the cost of steel doubles, and I don't know what it's gonna do with these tariffs, and maybe it's not an issue at all, I don't know, but I don't think we can ask the contractor to shoulder that whole part of it.
I understand that, but I also don't think we can ask the taxpayers to do so when we have a limit in a budget on how much we said that this library is gonna cost. I think that's absolutely unacceptable, so I think that would put us in a position where we need to rescope again, maybe some features disappear or some bottom, layer doesn't get done in time, or.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. I think we have to try very hard, and in fact, we probably have to stay within the $3.5 million budget.
Right.
But I think, structuring the contract so that there's a way for the contractor and the town to negotiate, should those tariffs come in, saying, okay, we got the tariffs, we can't leave the steel out, we gotta build the building.
Right.
or anything
right.
else. I wouldn't single out tariffs. Tariffs to me is just the latest news on TV. And the price of steel swings all over the place through the course of any given year, depending on usage and construction activity.
Well,
Once we start putting in multiple conditions and contingencies into something which we worked very hard to get a fixed price bid on, I find that fraught with upcoming peril.
We already had alternatives put in there, such as the finishing off of the basement. Things like that could still not be done, and might be done towards the end of the project after we know that we haven't, had any increases.
well, but I think what FI is telling us, though, is that they're telling us that they're comfortable with fluctuations and everything else. The only thing they're scared about is the steel tariff. And so the rest of the contract remains a fixed price contract, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Well,
we've been talking with them.
I didn't see steel singled out in that email.
Steel, gypsum,
Oh, is it? Okay.
Right.
Office furniture?
no.
Asha?
Well, if it's.
Steel, gypsum, et cetera.
That's a soft cost and wouldn't be
What's
included in
cetera?
that contract.
Yeah, it says steel, gypsum, et cetera.
Anything
Well-
that's affected by tariffs, not just general increases in cost. It has to do with the tariff,
And it seems to me we could structure the contract so that there was a percentage trigger at which, if the price goes up 10% on something,
Yeah.
I think they understand that, and they made that part and parcel of their fixed contract agreement, I think.
Yeah.
But if the price of steel, for example, goes up 30% or something, then they may not be able to handle that, and then they'd have to come back to us, and we'd have to, as you say,
Rescope
rescope
the
it. If we
project,
make it part of
yeah.
the contract, then we can sort of move forward with
Yeah.
it and
Right.
come to an agreement. I think that would be the way to handle that. And I don't know, I'm not an expert, I don't know what the verbiage would be.
Wouldn't you, I'm going back to the alternatives, wouldn't you go back into using a couple of those?
I
that
think
may-
you'd have to, yeah.
Right,
But
so-
I think for now, I mean, let's assume for now that the contract goes forward, that they suggested a fixed price contract for us with the plans as they were, and if there's no issues with tariffs, and then that will go forward.
But you would want to include the alternatives in the contract as a placeholder should things go to pieces.
Well,
But
I think
I
that'll
think
come
it's-
back to the select board
Yeah, I
at
think it'll
some
have to be
point.
negotiated at some point, because the alternatives that we think of right now, in a year when the issue comes up, might be different.
Okay?
I think we're gonna know about the tariffs, if, what the pricing's gonna be is, Charlie's working really hard now on, nailing down pricing, trying to, hedge his bets so that even if the tariff is, implemented, that they'll have a price and they'll have the stuff already on order and potentially not have to pay it. But, I think we'll know early on, how much, what impact this is gonna have, if at any. It may have none.
I do have an insurance question when we get to that point.
Well, because Asha's looking for guidance from the board on how to
Exactly.
handle this.
Do you have
And I would suggest, you can pick whatever number you want, but I would suggest that we put some verbiage in there that just says if costs for materials rise as a result of tariffs by a percentage of more than whatever, pick the number, I don't know what
Right.
the number would be, and an aggregate amount of, pick a number in there too, because if the item's $100 and it goes to 150, who cares?
Right.
But if it's, 500,000 and it goes to 700,000, that's real money. So that would be my suggestion as to how to handle it, would be some way like that.
Then what happens?
Then the contractor and the town will have to negotiate, given that increased cost, the other scope of the project. In other words,
We'll have to rescope.
we'll have to rescope the project, so
maintain
basically,
the
it means
price.
that
Or to
we're not gonna
maintain the
hold,
cap.
we're not gonna hold them to doing the whole thing.
Right.
For
Right.
the total
The
price that we'll have to
contractor and the
negotiate.
owner will have to.
Right, we're not gonna hold them responsible for that increase, but we're also not gonna hold the taxpayers
No,
responsible.
right.
Exactly.
But we're not gonna hold them to say, well, you said you'd do the
Yes,
whole
sure,
thing, so that
yeah,
if those
right.
costs go up. So
Fair.
I think it's just a matter of,
Take some risk.
yeah, exactly. And they're taking a fair amount of risk
Yeah.
in this anyway, so I think it's only right that we share it. So
Just-
I don't know what the percentage to the board, do we wanna dictate that, or should
No, I
we leave
think
that
that
up to Rick
somebody
and?
comes back to recommend something to us.
Okay.
But, okay, so,
So you're comfortable with that option, that we come up with a number that's a
I would come up with a
percentage of-
percentage number and an aggregate number,
Okay.
or a dollar number, so, or whatever thing.
How are you gonna know
Yeah, right.
what percentage of the price of steel is a tariff?
It'll be defined.
Well, it's defined now, so somebody's gonna calculate what the difference is gonna be, because they're paying a tariff now, perhaps, on imported steel.
Well, not if it's still at sea.
Well, but even if it was delivered last week, it could be a challenge.
It could be, but I think part of this is we have to have some faith with PHI, and I think we've expressed that faith in them before, that we have to understand that they're gonna do their best to not have to trigger whatever clause we put in there. They just wanna have some protection.
right. And I guess what I want to say is that this contract still has some issues in it, and so, and again, it's no reflection on PHI, it's a reflection, I won't comment what it's a reflection on, but, for example, we know that we have a guaranteed maximum contract with PHI, and save for this tariff discussion, right? And the contract defines the contract sum as being $2,971,304, subject to additions and deductions as provided in the contract documents. And then the contract goes on to talk about change orders and how the change orders will affect the contract sum. the lawyers that are working for us it's apparently not been communicated to them, or they haven't internalized the fact that this is a guaranteed maximum contract. It doesn't float around based on change orders. This is a core value on which this board approved of the FI contract, and FI knows that, of course, and FI's not trying to back away from that, but the lawyers have not written this document to reflect that in any way. And what you got back from Asha today was, oh, some of the stuff in here may not apply, but everything's okay. It's not okay. And having that stuff about the change orders in there implies, even if they put a guaranteed maximum contract in here, that stuff still has to be fixed. It has to come out, or it gives somebody, not that FI would ever do this, but it gives somebody an argument down the road to say, a guaranteed fixed contract is really not a guaranteed fixed contract. It's got to be reworked. If not, we're not
Yeah,
protecting the town in any way whatsoever.
There's two ways, it seems, we kind of looking at that contract, some portion of it, there's two ways we can do it. We can just delete the subject to additions and deductions, or have something else.
No, it's way more involved throughout the contract than that.
Rick, what we need to do is communicate
There's
exactly
a
what.
good lawyer sitting in the audience that could be really valuable in working with our lawyers on this.
But we need to communicate, it's a maximum fixed.
How do you feel now?
Yeah, I did,
And all
I
the other
did.
supporting verbiage in the
I
contract
sent an
needs to be.
email back to the lawyers
We
today.
have, that was made clear to them, that there was a guaranteed, that there's a maximum price.
It's not in here.
So we have to go back and do some more work on that.
Yeah, and we need to get this contract and, whatever their next version is, we need to get in plenty of time. And frankly, I think that some people need to have a discussion, if it means that maybe we get some people to volunteer to have a discussion with them or whatever. I'm looking at Denise. Then great, let's do that, because this is not protecting the town.
My recommendation would be to have you work directly with
Yeah,
Asha and I.
I'd be happy to.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
Well, and the other
You're-
question I have is, an early conversation we had today, Rick, is that FI is mobilizing at this point, and they're doing
Yeah.
that under the, good faith that we're
Sure.
gonna have a contract.
And we
so,
are.
So I just,
we just
I
gotta
guess
get
the
the-
question is, at what point does this start to hold that up?
Yeah, but let's look at this. May 13th, today is May 13th. Today was supposed to be the day that we were
Right.
supposed to be picking a winning bidder,
Right.
okay? And we weren't even starting the drafting of the the negotiation of the contract, okay?
I'm
So
not
we're
I'm not criticizing.
I know,
I'm
but
just-
I'm just saying, we are still ahead of schedule,
Yeah,
so let's, But
we
we
have to get
have
this done right, but I just,
Absolutely.
I'm asking the question as to what is the timing on it, given that FI wants to kind of get going on stuff.
As soon as we can get it pulled together. But Deb, if you're willing and able, you're back around now, to be the,
yeah,
kind of the
I'll be happy
reviewer.
to.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to round up another.
And I think, from the discussion this evening, I think we're clear on what we want to do on the tariff issue,
Yeah.
at least in the.
Conceptually, yeah.
Yeah,
But the absolute numbers, though, we've gotta,
yeah, we've got to
we
figure out.
can't do a random pick of any percentage or maximum cap, particularly around steel. What
Yeah.
percentage of this total 2.9 million is steel purchase? What's the total spend gonna be? And then we have to look at what's the current tariff, what's the net change,
Yeah.
what triggers what.
So I think the end result here is that Deb will work with Rick and Asha and Bettina. And I think you put everybody in the room and shut the door and don't let them out till it's done. And we'll get it done. Because I think town is a willing party, FI is a willing party.
Yeah,
We
right.
just have to, have to
Exactly.
language I's dotted and the
Reiterate,
T's crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no reflection on FI or our excitement about going forward or anything.
And if, if Denise would be interested as a member of the foundation who has an interest in this, I'd be happy to include her in the discussion.
I'm glad you said that because I really would like to include her and she's nodding her head.
All right.
Yeah, and then you know, unless something weird happens, she'll be sitting up here in another month, so,
Yep,
that works too.
yep.
Okay, do we need to do anything else on that? Okay, and that'll be another item that I'll have on the agenda for May 28th, even if we're not ready, just to have a
Yeah.
progress report, so the public hears what we're talking about and where we're going with that.
My only question surrounded the insurance and I was just going over it again, and we're happy with the way that is, that the
That
owner.
reminds me, I have not gotten anything back from our insurance company. I sent it
Yeah.
off to them to make sure that it carried the right,
Yep.
I don't think. Let me just see.
Well, I mean, I know some of the property owners up around there have shown or voiced a little bit of concern about, you know, the people that are gonna be doing the blasting, for instance. Are they going to be providing adequate insurance? And if they don't, does the towns supplement theirs for coverage for things that may or may not end up getting damaged?
I haven't seen anything back from the insurance company. It went out, I think, last Thursday, probably Friday, to the insurance company, so.
Okay. And the only other question I have is, they're planning to start work on the stream stabilization soon, right?
Right,
But that's
and we're-
outside of this contract, I believe.
We're
That's a
working
separate
on
line item.
another contract for that.
Okay.
Which,
And that's a contract that probably you can sign with, under the purchasing policy,
Typically-
because the
typically I
amount
do.
isn't
It was
that high.
approved in the budget
Right,
for this year.
right.
Right.
Yeah, there's money in the
So
budget this year,
it's-
so, okay, I just wanna make that clear, because,
Yep.
they do wanna get going, and that's, I
They're
mean,
supposed
the
to
more they can do, we heard tonight already about what delays can do to a project, so.
we're hoping to start at the end of this week or early next week, provided we can get a contract nailed down.
Okay.
But it's a $30,000 job.
Right, okay.
That's a stream.
The stream
stream.
stabilization, yeah. Okay, discussion of the charge of the library building committee. We have that in our packets, and some things have changed since the charge was put together. So, where does I know, Deborah, you have some strong feelings on this, so where do we wanna go with this?
Well, as you say, some things have changed and some things, some things are, we're beyond some things like the bid and all that stuff.
Right.
And so, to me, I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think need to be changed or taken out. So it makes sense to do a new charge, but, I guess what I have, concerns about is where we talk about individual change orders in excess of $25,000 require approval of the building committee, and individual change orders in excess of $50,000 require approval of the building committee and the select board. I want the select board to be way more involved in this than in excess of $50,000. I mean, like the whole tariff thing, I mean, that just goes to show you, there is a lot here that is moving parts, and I do not want to just delegate much of the board's responsibility to the building committee. I don't want to be picking out paint color and furniture, okay? But I don't want expenditures of any significance to be done or affected without, or when it comes to rescoping the project, that has to come, because of tariffs, that has to also come before before the select board, not just rest in the building committee, in my opinion.
So, do you have a suggestion as to changing these dollar numbers, or do you wanna, how do you wanna handle that?
I wanted to discuss it with
I
everybody
just want,
and see
I'm
what
happy to
other
have the
people
discussion, but
thought.
you brought it up, I wondered if you had a suggestion.
I brought up the concern, I'm open to other people's
Well,
views on
the-
suggestion.
The concern is valid. We should not come into a select board meeting and find out that, not only by this committee, but by any other, that costs have increased based on approvals in little bits and pieces that add up to $100,000. We don't have that much room.
No.
Right.
And I think we need to just, it's not keep our finger on it, but we're all in this together, and if there's a change, it's gonna increase costs or decrease costs, we need to know about it.
Given the fact that
Yeah.
it does not, there's not planned a lot of, there's not a lot of change orders planned because it's a
Right.
guaranteed price.
Right.
The need for this section,
Yeah,
you're liable to see very few change orders.
yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, well, I know that it's been designed in such a way to have, you know, a few change orders, but I guess the part that you said that that I agree with in particular, Rick, is that given that it's a guaranteed fixed cost, if there's change orders, those change orders are absorbed.
have to
I mean,
balance
they're
out,
not, yeah,
Yeah.
they're not affecting our bottom line.
Right.
Except for this whole issue we've been talking about with the tariffs.
Can,
So that creates a little different dynamic now. Which is, again, a reason why we just need to rewrite this whole thing, because
Right.
it's just a
Just
different
that
day.
section.
can somebody explain to me perhaps, now that we're in a public meeting and I can ask these questions? Now, and again, I'm not trying to stir things, I'm just trying to cover everyone's collective behinds. When we hired Phi originally, it was to review the documents that came in from the bidders for accuracy and thoroughness, and to make recommendations based on that. So now that we no longer have them as a consultant, but yet as the contractor, who is reviewing theirs for the same thing that they would be reviewing other people's?
Well, that's one thing we have to talk about in the process of hiring a new owner's rep, which,
And the
But
architect
that needs
does-
to be done, shouldn't it,
Right.
before the contract is done?
No, I
No,
think we can do it.
yeah.
can do all
it's-
everything.
It's a parallel track,
All
I
right,
think.
I'm just,
Yeah,
Trying
but I
to
think we
ask.
do, I mean, and Rick has already spoken with, and I think we may take an executive session this evening to talk about some of these other contracts and the process we want to use to do that. But that process has already begun, but you're absolutely right, we gotta have somebody else
Yeah.
who's acting as our owner's rep in
Right.
this process. And it may be that the scope of that work is not the same as it was, or would have been with Phi, we're not sure yet, how that's gonna shake out.
One thing that concerns me a little bit, and this is just a general comment, that, you know, if we're going with fine to a fixed contract, not to exceed price, it's going to be critical that the fewer cooks in the kitchen is going to be a good thing. And by that, what I'm meaning is, you know, Phi is not going to be able to tolerate having people from the building committee telling them what to do, having people from the select board telling them what to do.
No.
You sort of need to,
That's
right up
narrowed-
front, say, here's the plans, here's where we're going, and then everybody needs to leave them alone, because
Yeah.
that's where you will start running
That's correct.
into.
Right.
We are all with you
We
in that.
totally agree with that. It's
Okay.
just, really, Doug, what it really boils down to is, what does the building committee get to say okay to versus what do they have to bring to the select board? You know, I mean,
Right.
in my mind, that's what the issue is. And again, the fact that it's a fixed contract, not to exceed contract, really brings into play, are these, you know, are these dollar numbers even the right, or any dollar numbers the right trigger?
Right, that's sort of what I
Right.
wonder
Any-
about, yeah.
Right.
And really, a change order, I mean, the contractor has their marching orders, build this as spec'd. Any change order would be driven by the owner.
Yeah, with,
Oh, 90%.
I mean, or it's maybe something like, well, we had planned on this kind of window and now we can't get them, so we
Yeah.
have to use.
Or
so- but I
this
think, I
outlet
mean,
needs to be moved a
yeah,
foot
yeah.
because of the steel.
And I think the
know,
owner's
and
rep
that's a change order.
is gonna be juggling all these groups. So that
Right.
Phi will deal with the owner's rep and not
Right.
with the select board. You know, the building committee will deal with the owner's rep and the select board will deal with the owner's rep. And so, you know,
Yeah.
I'm coming along to thinking maybe this change order thing should just be
Right.
rewritten without any dollar amounts in it and just say that all change orders, it says will be reviewed by the architect and the owner's representative, and then, you know, they could be presented to the building committee for a recommendation, the building committee could then present to the select board for recommendation, and then if,
Yeah, I mean, if they're significant, there has to be some kind of way to identify what is significant or not. I mean, we don't want to know about the
Yeah, exactly.
color of the paint on the walls.
I mean,
and
I guess I would say if
We
there's.
just don't want to be
there's
blindsided by
two select board
something.
members on the building committee, is that enough? Is that enough to, you
Well, three is
can't have more than two.
can't have more than two.
What I'm saying is that there's heavy select board representation on the building committee, so.
I remember us trying to talk you into taking one of those open slots that there might be when you
Not
got
committing to
done.
anything
Well,
tonight.
Yeah,
let's
well,
not-
no.
That's
yeah,
not here nor
let's-
there at
let's
this
not.
point. So, but, you know, so, and I don't, it may be that, and that's a tough question, you know, what's significant? Maybe it's
Right.
not a dollar amount, maybe it's, you know, the appearance of something or
Well,
design
exactly.
thing that is important to Ben, you know, that maybe, who knows what that is, and so,
What do you require, Rick, of department heads? I mean, this is not apples to apples, but what do you require of Mike, for instance? That's quite a high dollar value before he has to come in and see you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's, it,
Is it 5 or 7,000 or something?
it to pay, a purchase, if he's on a purchase order, it would depend on if it's in a purchase order or not. But it seems like that this piece could be handled not by the building committee, but by, I think the change orders are gonna be minimal.
Yeah,
And I think this piece could be handled by the board, you know, I think.
I think that the building committee should be involved, I mean, they're,
yeah. Yeah, well,
I guess I'd be in favor of just taking the dollar amounts out and just putting in a procedure and see how it goes. I mean, you know, and then you're gonna have to, you know, if there's one that slips by and the board is unhappy, then maybe you have to change the procedure. I don't know how else to do it.
why don't
really.
we all think a little further about it and we'll
Yeah.
noodle around about it? And it's not like, I mean, I think getting the owner's rep on board and talking to the owner's rep about their suggestions here could be a good move.
Right.
You know, we need to get that on, that on board, and, I mean, there's nothing for the building committee to do, you know, in the next couple weeks.
No,
So we've
they
got
haven't
some
even
time to to sort this through,
And
I
I
think.
think, you know, Bill Chapman couldn't be here tonight, he was away, but, and Bill's been involved with town stuff for a long time. He probably will have some very good suggestions about how to do this as well. And I think it'd be good to listen to him. Okay. Next item is, vote to close Lime Rock Street, and this is, the street is gonna have to close at some point, and the motion that we have, I assume it's, I move to authorize closing Lime Rock Street, but that word is missing.
Oh, is it?
As needed, I think that's probably fine. And we'll let the professionals decide when they wanna do it, and for safety reasons and things like that, so.
Yeah.
I would await a motion on this item.
I move to authorize Lime Rock Street and the sidewalk on Russell Avenue in front of the library lot. I move to authorize what?
Do you need
There's
to be
something missing.
closed?
I move to authorize
closure.
closure of Lime Rock Street and the sidewalk on Russell Avenue in front of the library lot as needed during the construction of the library.
Okay, I have a motion, do we have a second?
I will second it for conversation purposes.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, discussion.
I don't think you ought to do as needed. You will confuse people, just close it, keep it closed, and only allow construction.
The reason I struggled with it a little bit, I agree with you, it allowed, if we get to the point where the, you're just laying it out for the construction period, and then we just determine that the construction period is over, and we can open it, so that if it gets to a point that it can get opened up again, we can open it up.
I see the as needed as pertaining only to the dates.
Right.
In other words, I wouldn't see it opening, you know, being open one day and closed the next day or something
Right.
like that, so.
Yeah, it's gonna-
Yeah, because once things are going in there, it's gonna be
Yeah,
closed.
it's gonna be
Right.
closed,
For
but,
Yeah.
a year.
but I don't, if we, you know, say, put dates in there and then it has to
Right.
be another week or something, then we gotta come back and make another motion.
Just so you know, if you approve this, it will get closed, it'll get closed probably tomorrow. So, because the trailer's gonna come in and, you know,
Yeah.
But it will,
Got by.
we have had some complaints from neighbors about people using, going through Lime Rock Street, contractors going through Lime Rock Street. So this will limit that. It will help solve that problem to some extent. I haven't told the neighbors that we will never use Lime Rock Street, for a truck to go through there, or Hughes Street. But it
Be
will.
nice to minimize that.
Yeah, it will certainly cut it way back.
Yeah, the plan will be to bring, if you've looked at it, there's two gates, and the
Yep.
plan is to bring all the construction traffic in on the Russell Avenue gate. I think the other gate is more just for emergency access for fire and stuff like that, so.
Well, it could, there could be that if there's a truck delivering equipment or materials or something like that, you're not gonna have them back out onto Russell Ave. They're gonna go out through Hughes Street. But the general day-to-day contractors, all the comings and goings of the contractors and all that stuff will not take place over Hughes Street. And we're also putting signage up on Hughes and on Lime Rock saying no outlet, no through traffic, no outlet.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if we vote tonight and it closes tomorrow, how does that jive with our commitment to minimize our disruption prior to the Memorial Day parade and Memorial Day activities?
I don't think it
will.
No, it
don't think
does.
they use-
It does.
Oh.
Because when the parade is forming up by
Yeah.
Smith's Garage or Grafham's, everybody that comes up through town now goes up over Lime Rock and through Hughes Street to circumvent everybody walking in the middle of the road.
You mean the people participating in the parade?
I'm sure we,
The people that are
through town.
participating in the parade, but there's also a significant amount of traffic that comes up through, across the bridge, up through Central, and it can't then take the turn onto Union Street. In the past, and even as recently as last year, they get rerouted up through Lime Rock Street onto Hughes Street, back onto Union, above the parade.
Except, well, yeah, 'cause there are times when that part is closed also, so there's a period of time when they can do that, but the parade starts right there at the garage, and often there are floats that are backed up on Hughes Street waiting to enter in too, so.
We just send
texting
everybody
Charlie
down
now.
the new stop signs down on Russell.
Right, send it down Russell, yeah.
I guess the question then becomes, does it make sense to postpone the closure of that till after Labor Day weekend?
I mean, Memorial Day, I think that
Memorial
the
Day,
issue is
sorry.
that they wanna get going on the,
Not if
on
that
the
affects the
stream.
construction.
Yeah,
And
it's got
I think the part that I had understood was Memorial Day would be access to the memorials in the park would still be free and clear on Memorial Day. I think that won't be impacted.
I
Yeah.
thought that was the intent
I just
also.
texted Charlie to ask him if we do close it, can it get opened for that day, for Memorial Day, so that the gates can get open so if people wanted to use it. I haven't,
There's,
no, he's saying no, we couldn't. If we close it tonight, can't open it.
yeah, because there's gonna
Yeah,
be
it's gonna be
heavy
equipment.
equipment in there.
It's too dangerous.
Do we have a motion in a second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's a 5-0 vote. Okay, liaison reports.
Parks Committee. They talked about you've got your capital improvement committee stuff in the meeting. The
Yeah.
Parks didn't get to the Diane in time. They talked about the bench and what they would sell it for potentially, and they would like to be able to take the money that they get as a profit and put it into a reserve account for future purchases of benches along those lines. That's one of the things they were talking about. Plantings, they were gonna talk with Farley and Son to Pascal Avenue, Island, by the old Hoboken. They were talking about Veterans Memorial Park on Clear, what is within the budget for the library site work. And they had talked about the drawings from Dave Eaton, referenced the intersection of 90 and 1. I think that's something that they had talked to you a little bit about, Doug, or no? They wanted to put, somebody had, I think, talked about putting plantings over at the end.
Yeah, to keep Rockport beautiful.
Right,
and-
but there's a certain thing that I mentioned to him, that within the road right away and covering up some of that stuff over there, you probably can't do it.
Well, Mike's gonna talk to DOT, and I haven't heard back from him, so I
Hey,
don't know what
If
the
we can't
plan
put a
is.
stop sign on Pascal Avenue, we can't put a tree up there.
Well, that's,
Oh. And the cleanup for Marilia Park will be on May 20th at 9 a.m. with a rain date of May 21st.
All right, next, Harbor Committee, last meeting worked on rental applications. Next meeting is on the 20th at 5:15. Recs Committee, next meeting is June 5th at 9. We covered the CIP meeting activities in great detail earlier. Next meeting is May 22nd with trying to get the bond proposal pulled together for this group's review. Pathways Committee has got a set of notes in draft, which will be coming out soon, and will be having its next committee on June 5th. A lot of work around bike awareness as a future activity and safety initiative, so that's on the horizon.
Anybody that doesn't have, by the way, anybody that doesn't have their committee's bylaws back into Diane, could you prompt them to do so? Because we've got them almost done, it's just, and I don't recall whose they are, but,
I would like to say they're not done then, because what we want to do is do a final review to make them consistent.
right. No, but
Before they come to the board.
But back into Diane,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
to get them back in.
Okay. Other liaison reports?
Midco Solid Waste, as mentioned, I think, in Rick's manager's report, we have interviews for new facility managers this Wednesday, candidates. So we're moving along on that, and I don't think that we have anything else major on Midco Solid Waste, Rick?
That
Not
we
that I
can
recall.
go over here, no.
Yeah, no. That's it.
Not much for me. ORC is done for the season. Cemetery has not met. Legacy Rockport met last week. I was not here. They were gonna have a meeting only about the bridge dinner and getting their ducks in a row for that.
Do they have a date for that?
It's in August. They do have a date, and Linda probably knows what it is, but I wanna say August 11th, is that?
If it rains, it will be the 18th.
Yeah, I think that's right. So it's a Saturday in August. They worked hard to stay away from the Lobster Festival and.
Saturday,
so-
August 10th,
Actually, it's a Sunday,
Sunday.
yeah.
We are having, 3 of us are having another meeting Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Okay. So that's in process. Ambulance review, as we know, did not meet, and that's it for me.
let's see, for me, planning board, I don't think has met since our last meeting. Library hasn't met since our last meeting. Oh, right, we did. We had, our financial advisors, in for their annual, financial review of the portfolio. And I think the general feeling is that, everything looked, pretty solid.
Until today.
Well, all right, until today, so that, and that's an annual event, and again, things look pretty good there.
We're currently very conservative with how we spend,
Yes.
aside from
Yeah.
the 150,000.
Rockport Beautification did some cleanup work over at Goodrich Park, just raking and cleaning up debris, and then had the Public Works Department got the furniture out over there. And they also redid the gardens at the post office, planted the planters and some pansies around both the entryway and the sign. And that's it for me.
we have an executive session for a personnel matter, and do we want to have one for the other issue as well? So should we do that one first? Because, so I don't remember what the statute
I
is for that one,
do.
if you got it ready to go.
I do. So I would move that we would just enter the executive session, right? Or, let's see,
We get two.
yeah. I move that we go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056C to discuss contracts relating to real or personal property.
Second.
Those are seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. And we will come out and go back into the second executive session. I don't know whether we'll have any.
Do we need to adjourn this one? Not